Hello students, this is Mrs. Sonal Patil. Today we will begin with the chapter 11, Transport in Plants. Plants need to move molecules over very long distances, much more than animals do. They also do not have a circulatory system in place. Water taken up by the roots has to reach all parts of the plant up to the very tip of the growing stem. The photosynthetates or food synthesized by the leaves have also to be moved to all parts, including the root tips embedded deep inside the soil. Movement across short distances, say within the cell, across the membranes, and from cell to cell within the tissue has also to take place. In a flowering plant, the substances that would need to be transported are water, mineral nutrients, organic nutrients, and plant growth regulators. Over small distances, substances move by diffusion and by cytoplasmic streaming, supplemented by active transport. Transport over longer distances proceeds through the vascular system and is called translocation. So, translocation is nothing but transport of substances in plants over longer distances through the vascular tissues is called translocation. And the vascular tissues are nothing but the xylem and phloem. By means of these vascular tissues, the substance is getting transported over longer distance, and that process is called as translocation. An important aspect that needs to be considered is the direction of transport. In rooted plants, transport in xylem is essentially unidirectional from roots to the stems. Organic and mineral nutrients, however, undergo multidirectional transport. Organic compounds synthesized in the photosynthetic leaves are exported to all other parts of the plant, including storage organs. From the storage organs, they are later re-exported. The mineral nutrients are taken up by the roots and transported upwards into the stem, leaves, and the growing regions. When any plant part undergoes senescence, nutrients may be withdrawn from such regions and moved to the growing parts. Hormones or plant growth regulators and other chemical stimuli are also transported, though in very small amounts, sometimes in a strictly polarized or unidirectional manner from where they are synthesized to other parts. Hence, in a flowering plant, there is a complex traffic of compounds moving in different directions, each organ receiving some substances and giving out some others. Coming to the means of transport. The transport of material into and out of the cells is carried out by a number of methods. These methods include diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. First, we will see what is diffusion. Movement by diffusion is passive and may be from one part of the cell to other, or from cell to cell, or over short distances, say from the intracellular spaces of the leaf to the outside. No energy expenditure takes place here. In diffusion, molecules move in a random fashion, the net result being substances moving from regions of higher concentration to regions of lower concentration. So, diffusion can be defined as the movement of molecules from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration is called as diffusion. It is a passive and a slow process, and here no energy expenditure takes place over here. So, no energy has been used or utilized over here for this particular process. And as I told, diffusion is a slow process and is not dependent on living system. Diffusion is obvious in gases and liquids, but diffusion in solids rather than of the solids is more likely. Diffusion is very important to plants since it is the only means for the gaseous movement within the plant body. Diffusion rates are affected by the gradient of concentration, the permeability of the membrane, separating them, temperature and pressure. So diffusion rates are affected by these all, that is the gradient of concentration. These factors are involved: the gradient of concentration, the permeability of the membrane, separating them, temperature and pressure. Coming to facellated diffusion. The diffusion rate depends on the size of the substances. Obviously, smaller substances diffuse faster. The diffusion of any substance across a membrane also depends on its solubility in lipids, the major constituent of the membrane. The substance soluble in lipids diffuse through the membrane faster. Substances that have a hydrophilic moiety find it difficult to pass through the membrane. Their movement has to be facilitated. Membrane proteins provide sites at which such molecules cross the membrane. They do not set up a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient must already be present for molecules to diffuse even if facellated by the proteins. This process is called facellated diffusion. So it is nothing but a passive form of transport across a cell membrane made possible by assistance of membrane bound proteins, which are called as aquaporins. Or it can be defined as the diffusion of hydrophilic substances along the concentration gradient through fixed membrane transport protein without involving energy expenditure is called facellated diffusion. And for this, the membrane possesses aquaporins and ion channels. No energy is utilized in this process. So these aquaporins are nothing but they are water carrier proteins present on the surface of plant membranes. These form canals or channels are actively involved in water transport across the membrane of root hair cells. In facellated diffusion, special proteins help move substances across the membrane without expenditure of ATP energy. So this here the diagram shows about the facellated diffusion, the first one, and the second one is showing us about the three types of diffusion, how it is occurring: passive, symport and the antipodes. It has been showing unipode, antipode and the symport. In the first diagram shows it is showing the facellated diffusion. Facellated diffusion cannot cause net transport of molecules from low to high concentration. This would require input of energy. Transport rate reaches a maximum when all the protein transporters are being used. Facellated diffusion is very specific. It allows cell to select substances for uptake. It is sensitive to inhibitors which react with protein side chains. The proteins form canals in the membrane for molecules to pass through. Some channels are always open, others can be controlled. Some are large, allowing a variety of molecules to cross. The porins are proteins, as I told you, they are proteins that form huge pores in the outer membranes of the plastids, mitochondria and some bacteria, allowing molecules up to the size of small proteins to pass through. The transport protein then rotates and releases the molecule inside the cell. Example, water canals made up of 8 different types of aquaporins. Come to the passive, symport and antipode. Some carrier or transport proteins allow diffusion only if two types of molecules move together. In a symport, both molecules cross the membrane in the same direction. In an antipode, they move in opposite direction. When a molecule moves across the membrane independent of the other molecule, the process is called unipode. So here it's been shown unipode, antipode and the symport. So remember, firstly it is unipode. In unipode, only one type of molecule moves across the cell membrane. In antipode, both molecules moves in opposite direction, and in symport, both the molecules cross the membrane in the same direction. So these were passive symport and antipodes. Coming to active transport. Active transport uses energy to pump molecules against a concentration gradient. Active transport is carried out by membrane proteins. Hence, different proteins in the membrane play a major role in both active as well as passive transport. Proteins that use pumps, pumps are proteins that use energy to carry substances across the cell membrane. These pumps can transport substances from low concentration to high concentration, and which is called as uphill transport. Transport rate reaches a maximum when all protein transporters are being used or are saturated. Like enzymes, the carrier protein is very specific in what it carries across the membrane. These proteins are sensitive to inhibitors that react with protein side chains. Proteins in the membrane are responsible for facilitated diffusion and active transport, and hence show common characteristics of being highly selective. They are liable to saturate, respond to inhibitors, and are under hormonal regulation. But diffusion, whether facilitated or not, take place only along a gradient and do not use energy. So active transport is nothing but the movement of molecule across a concentration gradient with the help of a metabolic energy, that is ATP is required. Movement of that, or you can define it as movement of molecules from region of lower concentration to region of higher concentration, because it is against the concentration gradient and it requires energy. Coming to plant water relations. Water is essential for all physiological activities of the plant and plays a very important role in all living organisms. It provides a medium in which most substances are dissolved. The protoplasm of cells is nothing but water in which different molecules are dissolved and suspended. A watermelon has over 92% water. Most herbaceous plants have only about 10 to 15% of its fresh weight as dry matter. Distribution of water within a plant varies. Woody plants have relatively very little water, while soft parts mostly contain water. A seed may appear dry, but it still has water. Otherwise, it would not be alive and respiring. Terrestrial plants take up huge amount of water daily, but most of it is lost to the air through evaporation from the leaves, that is transpiration. So through transpiration the water is lost. A mature corn plant absorbs almost 3 liters of water in a day, while a mustard plant absorbs water equal to its own weight in about 5 hours. Because of this high demand of water, it is not surprising that water is often the limiting factor for plant growth and productivity in both agricultural and natural environments. Coming to water potential. Water potential can be defined as it is the difference between free energy of water molecules in a pure solvent and free energy of water molecules in a solution. To comprehend plant water relation, an understanding of certain standard terms is necessary. Water potential, which is denoted as psi W, is a concept fundamental to understanding water movement. Solid potential psi S, denoted by, and pressure potential psi P are the two main components that determine the water potential. Water molecules possess kinetic energy. In liquid and gaseous form, they are in random motion, that is both rapid and constant. The greater the concentration of water in a system, the greater is its kinetic energy or water potential. Hence, it is obvious that pure water will have the greatest water potential. If two systems containing water are in contact, random movement of water molecules will result in net movement of water molecules from the system with higher energy to the one with lower energy. Thus, water will move from the system containing water at higher water potential to the one having low water potential. This process of movement of substances down a gradient of free energy is called diffusion. Water potential is denoted by the Greek symbol psi and is expressed in pressure units such as pascals. By convention, the water potential of pure water at standard temperatures, which is not under any pressure, is taken to be zero. If some solute is dissolved in pure water, the solution has fewer free water and the concentration of water decreases, reducing its water potential. Hence, all solutions have a lower water potential than pure water. The magnitude of this lowering due to dissolution of solute is called solute potential. Solute potential is always negative. The more the solute molecules, the lower is the solute potential. For the solution at atmospheric pressure, psi W is equal to, or water potential is equal to solute potential. If a pressure greater than atmospheric pressure is applied to pure water or a solution, its water potential increases. It is equivalent to pumping water from one place to another. Pressure can build up in plant system when water enters a plant cell due to diffusion, causing a pressure built up against the cell wall. It makes the cell turgid. This increases the pressure potential. Pressure potential is usually positive, though in plants, negative potential or tension in water column in the xylem plays a major role in water transport up a stem. Pressure potential is denoted as psi p. Water potential of a cell is affected by both solute and pressure potential. The relationship between them is as follows. So water potential is equal to solute potential plus pressure potential. Coming to the next, osmosis. The plant cell is surrounded by a cell membrane and a cell wall. The cell wall is freely permeable to water and substances in solution, hence is not a barrier to movement. In plants, the cells usually contain a large central vacuole whose contents and the vacuolar sap contribute to the solute potential of the cell. In plant cells, the cell membrane and the membrane of the vacuole, the tonoplast together are important determinants of movement of molecules in or out of the cell. Osmosis is the term used to refer specifically to the diffusion of water across a differentially or semi-permeable membrane. Osmosis occurs spontaneously in response to a driving force. The net direction and rate of osmosis depends on both the pressure gradient and concentration gradient. Water will move from its region of higher chemical potential to its region of lower chemical potential until equilibrium is reached. At equilibrium, the two chambers should have the same water potential. If the potato tuber is placed in water, the cavity in the potato tuber containing a concentrated solution of sugar collects water due to osmosis. It is a very familiar experiment which demonstrates osmosis, that is potato osmoscope experiment. One more is there, a thistle funnel tube experiment, where a thistle funnel filled with sucrose solution and is filled with the sucrose solution and kept inverted in a beaker containing water. Water will diffuse across the membrane to raise the level of the solution in the funnel. Pressure can be applied to stop water movement into the funnel, that is external pressure applied from upper part of the funnel. No water diffuses into the funnel through the membrane. So when the external pressure is applied from upper part of the funnel, no water diffuses into the funnel through the membrane. This experiment demonstrates osmosis. Coming to the next concept, that is plasmolysis. The behavior of the plant cells with regard to water movement depends on surrounding solution. If the external solution balances the osmotic pressure of the cytoplasm, it is said to be isotonic. So, if the external solution is more dilute, the cytoplasm then the cytoplasm, it is called as hypotonic, and if the external solution is more concentrated, it is called as hypertonic solution. So the behavior of the plant cell with regard to the movement depends on the surrounding solution, as I told you. So there are three types of solution: isotonic solution, hypotonic solution, and hypertonic solution. Cells swell in hypotonic solution and shrink in hypertonic ones. Plasmolysis occurs when water moves out of the cell and the cell membrane of the plant cell shrinks away from the cell wall. This occurs when the cell is placed in the solution that is hypertonic to the protoplasm. So here plasmolysis is nothing but it is a shrinkage. It is a process of shrinkage of protoplasm in a cell due to exoosmosis in hypertonic solution. Water moves out. It is first lost from the cytoplasm and then from the vacuole. The water when drawn out of the cell through diffusion into the extracellular fluid causes the protoplasm to shrink away from the walls. The cell is said to be plasmolysed. So this shrinkage is called as plasmolysis. The movement of water occurred across the membrane, moving from an area of high water potential to an area of lower water potential outside the cell. When the cell is placed in an isotonic solution, there is no net flow of water towards inside or outside. So here the diagram shows the stages of plasmolysis, how the protoplast gets withdrawn when the tissue, plant cell, maybe plant cell or the animal cell, kept in the hypertonic solution. So here you can see that the cell is turgid cell, and then slowly you can see the protoplast is getting withdrawn, and lastly you can just see the protoplast finally gets shrinked, which is called as plasmolysed cell. If the external solution balances the osmotic pressure of the cytoplasm, it is said to be isotonic. When water flows into the cell and out of the cell and are in equilibrium, the cells are said to be flaccid. The process of plasmolysis is usually reversible. When the cells are placed in the hypotonic solution, water diffuses into the cell, causing the cytoplasm to build up a pressure against the wall that is called turgor pressure. The pressure exerted by the protoplast due to entry of water against the rigid walls is called pressure potential, psi p. Because of the rigidity of the cell wall, the cell does not rupture. This turgor pressure is ultimately responsible for enlargement and extension of the growth of the cells. So that was about the turgor pressure. So turgor pressure is nothing but it is a hydrostatic pressure exerted by the cell walls due to endoosmosis. It is called as turgor pressure. A plant cell placed in the hypotonic solution, when it is placed in the hypotonic solution, the water enters into the cell sap due to endoosmosis, and the cytoplasm exerts pressure against the cell wall, which is called as a turgor pressure. So that was about the turgor pressure, and we have studied about the plasmolysis today, studied about the osmosis, we have studied about the plant-water relation and means of transport. So with this we will stop today, and in the next class we will begin with the next part of this chapter. Thank you.